Hello, and welcome back to How to Change the World, the podcast that provides changemakers with the tools, inspiration, and insights to drive meaningful impact. Today, I am joined by Shanté Micah and Josh Moody, the co-founders of Good News. At Javelina, one of the most common desires of our clients is to receive media attention. They want to be in the news, on the TV, in newspapers and magazines, on podcasts, on blogs, so that they can get their incredible story out into the world and connect with the people that they want to connect with. They want to tell the story of the change that they are making and demonstrate the incredible value that they create in their local community. And this can be so frustrating because earned media can feel complex and there is so much mystique around how you receive good quality earned media attention without paying an agency thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars every single month to make it happen. That is the problem that Shanté and Josh created Good News to solve. In creating Good News, they have really created a company that demystifies that process and not only guides their clients through how they can create and secure earned media coverage, but also teaches them how to do it for themselves on an ongoing, sustainable basis. Shanté has been working for over 2 decades in public relations and visibility, and she has helped countless entrepreneurs, business owners, and change makers secure notable and valuable media features. She's also the author of PR Power Play, which is a book that guides and demystifies the complexities of earned media and empowers brands to navigate today's PR landscape with confidence. Her co-founder, Josh, is a digital marketing strategist and award-winning SaaS developer who has spent more than the last 14 years building AI-driven marketing tools, spearheading large-scale data projects, and really architecting approaches and systems for growth. Together, they have created Good News. And today, in our conversation, they share really everything about how you go about creating incredible earned media, securing that coverage so that you can get your message out and connect with the people that you need to connect with. They are so generous with their insights. They really break down, this is how you do it. And this is how you can make sure that you're getting your story out to the world on an ongoing basis. I hope that this conversation is so incredibly valuable for you. And without any further ado, my conversation with Shanté Micah and Josh Moody. Shanté Micah and Josh Moody, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'm so happy to have you guys. So I'm so curious how each of you would describe the work that you do to a 5-year-old.
Oh, so the work that we do is we create visibility, which is we make sure that the right people see your message, your mission, and then we position you as if you're a celebrity, as if you are that celebrity CEO or founder or executive, so that when you want to tell good stories, you have the positioning and you have the platform and people want to follow you.
Yeah. I mean, my answer would be very, very similar. It's funny. I think of like what you just said, Shanté. I have had a 5-year-old and he's always wanted to become president. That's his like number one goal. Mm-hmm. And so what I would always tell him is, what we do is we help people get their message out there. If you want to be president, you have to have a message. And I think in a nutshell, that's what we do. It's not just authority, but authority and credibility.
And what's the origin story behind Good News? What were each of your paths to the work and how did you found your company?
Josh and I have known each other for 11 years and we met back when we were at an agency, and Josh was someone, they were trying to court me. They were trying to get me to the agency. I was a solopreneur. And I said, no, I'm good. I'm really happy with what I'm doing. And then they did something really smart and they said, just meet with one of our top people at the agency. And that was when I met Josh. And I have to say that the moment I met Josh, there was something where, we spoke the same language. We had a lot of similar interests, but a massive amount of respect for him. And we worked not on the same teams ever, We ran our own teams, we ran them in our own ways, but we always found time to have these conversations where it was apparent to us that we had aligned values. He ended up moving a number of places, but still working for the agency. And eventually I went on to another role. But about 4 years ago, I had just told myself, if I think of someone, reach out to him, just as a standard practice. And I thought of Josh. I reached out to him, and his response was, I literally thought about you just yesterday. We caught up and we agreed to be accountability partners on some projects we were working on individually. And that was it. And then a few months in, Josh asked me the pivotal question of, would you ever want to partner on something? And I was like, that list of people I want to partner with is really short. And you're like number one. So we didn't know at first. Honestly, it took about 2 or 3 weeks. And then I kept getting calls from people asking me about PR. I was noticing the landscape. I'd been in it for 20 years. Josh is more digital marketing focused, marketing. And I said, I think there's this blue ocean. PR has a PR problem. I'd like to fix that. And he was like, I'm in. So honestly, the framework I brought to him was the thing that he engineered. And we just kept unpacking it in this really new way and built the tool that we have now. That was the thing I wish I had had for 20 years. So that's the shortish version.
Yeah, totally. And my journey was interesting because I, like Shanté said, I was from the marketing field, right? So a lot of my background of 13 plus years was marketing. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I transitioned from marketing more into product and engineering, where I was building marketing tools. So I was overseeing marketing tool builds and kind of coming at it from a subject matter expert from the marketing side, as well as a product manager. And so that timing kind of met up where I was in the weeds of building products and innovative systems, and had some of this experience in kind of in the weeds with Shanté doing this marketing PR stuff. And then it just, hey, let's blend those together and let's create some tools that streamline our work so that we can help people connect with other humans.
Yeah.
I love it. So Shanté, you said PR has a PR problem. Tell me more.
I think for the most part, people don't know what PR actually is and what it's not. And there is a mystique to it. There is a glamour to it. But, with influencers who say, well, I just got PR, and they're talking about skincare products or just actual products in hand, that's not technically PR. And I think a lot of PR traditionally has been, it's mostly functions through agencies or professionals in-house. And it's quite elusive. And I think there's a lot of gatekeeping. So our approach to good news was, we need to demystify this. We need to make it accessible, because the future of marketing really is PR, in this storytelling, this ability to tell a story in a very genuine way and to position right. So PR has a PR problem because no one actually can tell you what it is. It is a different answer, and it's usually something to do with, well, it stands for press release, right? No. So we're going to fix that, but yes.
Let's talk a little bit more about how the PR and media landscape is changing, because I'm fascinated about how it is changing, but also the implications that has for change makers who want to get their message and their story out into the world.
Yeah, I've got a few different opinions on this. So one thing that Shanté and I talk about a lot in terms of the changing landscape is a lot of people, when they get into a role where they're over marketing or PR or just general comms, and I've experienced this specifically in this space with other heads of marketing of nonprofits. The first thing that they'll do is they will say, hey, let's get a press release out the door. And, that's going to share our message. I had one client in particular that was like, look, I'm over PR now. I'm just going to start hitting up journalists and send this press release out. And we started talking about it, and I walked her back. I was like, okay, so what's our goal here? And it was very much, the type of clients that you work with. Look, we're looking to raise funding so that we can then further change the world. And I was like, okay, I think there's a different way here than, either just sending out press releases, mass blasts, that kind of thing, or inversely going after kind of the more inbound approach of SEO and advertising. Because the people that they're trying to connect with are out there, but they more than likely aren't looking, hey, who can I fund in this, in this field or this nonprofit. They're kind of going about their lives, listening to podcasts, consuming social media, and so on and so forth. And so Shanté and I really have this conviction that PR really is becoming the new, all-encompassing marketing. It's the future of all of this, because as these people, these change makers at various organizations want to share their message, one of the best ways that they can do that is connect with other humans. A human first approach, like what we're doing here. They can get on other podcasts and share those stories, those human-centric stories. And from that, we then get the traditional marketing kind of assets created for them, right? We have a podcast interview created that turns out to, you can turn that into a blog post. You can publish that on YouTube and TikTok and snip it up for social. So it really does come to this kind of human first approach, especially in the world of AI, where now the barrier to entry to create content is so low. People can just, create en masse. And so we feel the space is changing to become more human centric. It's going to take a minute because people are infatuated with AI, me included. We feel like we can leverage AI and these different tools to basically do the busy work so that we can continue to focus human to human, which I think has always been the most effective way.
Yeah. And I would say that media, it is changing in that we're seeing massive layoffs at traditional publications. So journalists are under more pressure to produce more stories on tighter deadlines and with fewer resources. So they do depend on good pitching, and they're still receiving upwards of, I talked to one journalist that received 300 pitches in a single day, most days. So most of those are going into a black void. So if you're going to do this, if you're going to pitch a story, you have to do it well. You have to do it in a way that's mindful of the journalist, the human on the other side of it, their beat, their body of work, their audience, and then just simply and powerfully, but very pithily, be able to convey and demonstrate that you understand all those things. And then, of course, you want them to want you and your story. But the change in the media is going to require us to be much more focused, much better at conveying the importance to their audience, to their beat, their body of work. And so the systems that we put in place, I've done this for 20 years as a professional, and I'm still, learning how to get better in it. So for someone who's, they're running a nonprofit, they have the actual fundraising, which is the majority of their work. They probably don't have time to manage an agency, let alone a whole download of theory and knowledge, as cool as it would be. But we need better turnkey solutions, not just databases either. So we're seeing a lot of changes. We're seeing a lot of changes into privatized, more podcasts are becoming the media source, which is cool because you get long form content. We get hosts like you that are willing to vet people like us. And then we get to be in front of your audience and we get to kind of share some authority. I think we're going to see some big things happening, honestly, in just traditional media.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. I think that one of the difficult things for our audience and for people working in social change at the moment, and maybe one of the difficult things for just people, is things are changing so rapidly and in all ways of life, right? In our work, in our technology, and how we connect with one another, and how we consume media, and how we tell stories, how we receive stories. And it can be really difficult sometimes to find your footing in that rate of change. And you just feel like you're in some kind of hellish roller coaster without any kind of seatbelts, and you have like no control. Mm-hmm. And so I completely agree that everything is going to look so different. So before we get into how we secure media and the thought behind your approach and how your approach is different, I want to talk a little bit more about kind of goals and how we define success when it comes to securing earned media and PR. because one of the things that I notice a lot with our clients is that they're really eager to secure coverage. And there's not always a lot of thought given to the type of coverage that's valuable. And the philosophy is like any and all coverage is good coverage. And so how would you answer that question? Like, how do you define what kind of coverage any organization would want to try and seek?
Josh and I talk about this ad nauseum. I mean, we did a sprint yesterday that was just hours of like, what does engineered omnipresence look like at a high level for most brands? And then how do you customize that on a modular level for each particular brand, their mission and message? And I'll let Josh get into kind of the specifics of that, but we would recommend most brands be looking at podcasts almost across the board. That long form content. And a lot of thought leaders would say the same in terms of it is the place where you get the attention of a goldfish on just about every other type of consumable, right? And then on podcasts, surprisingly, you get people who check in and they stick with you for 20 minutes, sometimes 3 hours if you're Joe Rogan, and they'll go back and check snippets and stuff. But the priority, I think that's where Josh has built a pretty brilliant weighted system and ability to make it modular as we look at individual brands.
And before you tell us about that, Josh, Shanté, do you mind just defining engineered omnipresence? Because I think I know what you mean by that, but right. I think it would be really helpful for people to understand what you mean by that.
Yeah, I mean, we say things like visibility, and people are like, yeah, I want visibility. But to your point, like that's still any and all visibility? Probably not. You want things with a positive sentiment or even a neutral sentiment, certainly not negative sentiment, but that happens. So an engineered omnipresence is the ability to earmark how many pitches do I need out the door in order to secure this many features across this many media categories. So the ability to hit milestones, and then they all have a compounding effect. So you get to leverage those for bigger wins, bigger opportunities. So we weight everything very carefully, and we just call it our engineered omnipresence. At one point, I think we were calling it effortless omnipresence, but it was like, it's not effortless. It's about as close as you can get, but it does require effort and ingenuity, which we take care of. Like that was important to us. So the omnipresence is, can you show up strategically across as many media categories that are fitting to your mission, your message, and can you do that in a way that has a compounding effect?
Got it. So, Josh, tell us more about the sausage, I guess, behind how it all works.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably the best context to give is, your original question was related to how do people track, the success? Is it just, anything and everything, or is it specific? And it can be both. Let me explain what that means. We focus on getting people kind of three core things: visibility, clout, and credibility, right? And we do it with a human first or human centric approach. But visibility, right, is about exposure and awareness, and clout and credibility are about gaining authority in the space so that people trust the message that you have to share. I mean, unfortunately, it's not enough to be good at the awareness part, the visibility part, and be able to get your message out there. But if no one's going to trust your message or know who you are, you're going to have a far less impactful message than otherwise. And the inverse is also true. If you're very authoritative, but you can't get your message out, you're unfortunately not going to make meaningful change. So we focus on the multiple kind of components there. So to answer your question regarding what to focus on, it depends on where the brand or individual is in their journey. See, if we're working with a brand new nonprofit, doesn't have a lot of clout and credibility nor visibility because they're brand new, then what we do is we break down media in kind of three tiers. We say tier 1, 2, and 3. We keep it very simple. And like Shanté mentioned, we pretty much always opt for, hey, you should start with podcasts. Podcasts are great for so many reasons, not just from a metric standpoint, but also from a psychological perspective. Because once these people start getting on podcasts, they tell their story, they're able to refine their story and kind of get more comfortable and familiar with it. The first few are going to be, they're going to be weird, but then you'll start to fall in place and you're going to feel good about it. And it's kind of infectious. You start getting that energy and you want to keep going. And so then that propels you to the next tier, tier 2, tier 3. But even those initial podcasts, tier 1 basically are, we say, go after young emerging podcasts that don't have a humongous audience, because, first things first, you got to test out your message. You got to refine kind of your story, your narrative ability, but then also start gaining traction. And that traction allows you to throw those logos on your social media, on your site, chop up those, snippets and post them. And it looks like you're everywhere. It looks like you're getting closer to that omnipresence, the engineered omnipresence. And then it stacks kind of like a snowball rolling down a hill. You can leverage those and those interviews and snippets to get tier 2, which is the next layer up in terms of how difficult it is to secure features on those shows, and then up to tier 3, which would be like the Joe Rogans, the NPRs, and what have you. So we use kind of that snowball effect. Now, I say all of those media, all the media that you can get, largely, not at all, but most can be valuable in certain ways. Some's going to give you the visibility, some's going to give you the credibility, right? You might just need those first few logos to secure even more press. So we use that tiered system of, tier 1, 2, and 3, and we use it in our system, but people can use it even without our system. Look, just go for some quick wins, start gaining authority, start gaining momentum, and crafting your narrative and getting comfortable with it. And then you can continue to progress, and you're going to naturally progress and get better and better. You're going to know what kind of pitches are sticking. You're going to know how to tell your story in a compelling and a pithy way, as opposed to an overly verbose way, and go from there. So honestly, start small. Don't get super overwhelmed with the nitty gritty, and you'll continue to compound your wins.
I love that. So I'm going to take us to a quick ad break, and then we'll come right back. And I want to ask you loads more about how we're defining good coverage and how we can get it. It is such a tough time for nonprofits, agencies, and changemakers. Funding is tight, capacity is stretched, and your work matters more than ever. And you need communication support that can keep up. That's why we are super excited to introduce our new suite of modular, flexible services, built to help you and your storytelling stay visible, resilient, and connected when it matters the most. Whether you need a quick messaging refresh or adaptable on-demand support, Javelina is here to help you move forward with clarity and strength. You can see this list of services and discounted prices at javelina.co/rapid-response-services. That's javelina.co/rapid-response-services. Okay, so you have walked us very well through how earned media is changing, how the PR landscape is changing, why it's so important, and how your approach is different and how you guide your clients through securing that coverage. What are some of the common mistakes that you see in trying to get coverage, and what would you suggest instead?
Usually it comes down to people rush to the pitch. They and with the use of AI, they say, oh, just create me a pitch. And it either comes across as a simple bio. That's actually one mistake, just apart from any other pitches. Just I probably hear from journalists and podcast hosts, they're just submitting their bio and saying, hey, will you have me on? And they have connected no dots. So they're expecting the host, the journalist, to connect the dots, and they're just not going to. They don't have the time. It's very self-serving. It's not connecting in those dots. Rushing to a pitch would mean you didn't do any of that due diligence. You didn't research the host. You didn't research the topic. You didn't research. We talked to someone yesterday that said, I get pitches that are people that are competitors to me. And clearly they didn't realize when they pitched, because they didn't do that due diligence, or they would know that the way I'm pitching is actually would be a hijack of your audience, right? So don't do that. Do the research. Make sure, especially when you get to hardened journalists. I started out in journalism before I got my master's in PR, and it is quite a field where you get a lot of pitches, and most of them are terrible. They're no research. It's we're thrilled to announce. Whatever follows, we're thrilled to announce is usually not that thrilling. So, and I know that like there's announcements you think this is newsworthy, you have to make it newsworthy. And what I tell most people is the number one job of a pitch is to make a stranger care. So if you can go into it knowing that is my job, that is my singular job, and then I need to do it in, best practices would be under 200 words, then I have a better chance at, maybe it's not the right time for that story to land, but that journalist is not going to write me off. They're not going to put me on a blacklist. So doing the pitch well and doing all of the due diligence before is how you're going to get coverage. And then the compounding effect of it is that more and more journalists, more and more podcast hosts are going to say, oh, they're actually a really good source for me. They come with good ideas, well-vetted ideas. They connect those dots for me, and either the timing's right or it's not.
For sure. Well, and I think a really good example of that is the email that I received from you, Shanté, about coming on How to Change the World. So I get a decent number of pitches, and it's growing. It's getting bigger and bigger. So most of the pitches are exactly what you described. There are sort of a description of the guest, and it either comes from the guest or more comes from some kind of pitching company or podcast connecting agency. And it's usually a description of the guest and how wonderful they are, which I don't doubt. 9 times out of 10, the topic has absolutely nothing to do with how to change the world. And, our podcast title is fair. Like, it does what it says on the tin. I'm not trying to hide sort of what we're up to here. And then your pitch came in, and in less than 200 words, I would guess, you just described why our audience needs to know about PR and earned media, why you're positioned to speak to that. And you also made my job easy for me because you told me, we could speak about these things, and these things were relevant to our audience. And what I really try to do, and I think what good storytelling does and what you guys do every day, is it's audience first. You're thinking about, what does the audience want? What does the audience need? And you exemplify that so great because your pitch did that to me. I was your audience for that email. And you certainly caught my attention. But then our conversation today is really about the people listening and what they need to know and what they want to know.
Josh put a framework together for that research. And that research it's a little bit about you, and it's a whole lot about not you.
Yeah.
And then eventually you get to the point where you get to create the pitch. But Josh, what are your thoughts on what we do to go into it to get a final product?
I feel like that pitch part is so critical because I can only see this getting worse with AI. Everyone is using AI for one-shot blog posts, one-shot email pitches, and they think it's good. A lot of people are like, oh, no, this is good. And I get it. If you're not in that world, it can look good. It can look, oh, I think it is fine. I'll send it. But if you're a journalist, a podcast host, and you're receiving hundreds of these, I mean, you start to see which ones are largely AI and which ones aren't. And so with this system, really simplifying it down, the whole point of the system isn't to be overly complex with all of this data and all this craziness. It's being able to compete with all that data far superior than most agencies can do, but for the intent of making it so you have more time to be a human, to have more time to just connect human to human. So for instance, with our process, the way that I envision it and the way that I would explain it to a 5-year-old is, when you're pitching someone, there's a few kind of factors at play here. It's a numbers game. You need to reach out to a lot of people, but that can easily really get gross real quick where people are like, oh, it's just a numbers game. I'm just going to blast these out, right? Not at all what we're talking about. But what we're talking about is you do need to be out there. You do need to be able to get pitches out there so you know what works. But simultaneously, you need to be able to spend the time to do the research at scale about these different individuals, about their podcasts, about their audiences. Because the goal here isn't just to jump on a show, to promote yourself and say, look how great we are, but it's to come with actionable value that people can take away. Because with that value, we know people will walk away and they'll be chewing on it, and then they'll want the frameworks, and they'll come back and they'll visit a blog, they'll visit other media, and then they'll take a next step and a next step and next step. And then pretty soon they're like, yeah, this framework is it. I'm starting to get results. Things are starting to work. So it's human first. It's systems and processes for the sole effect of freeing up, your time, whoever's time, in order to just connect human to human.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm really taking away from our conversation is where we started, and how you explain your work to a 5-year-old is, we help organizations get their message out. And what we're really coming to is getting your message out is a lot about who you're getting it to and what they care about and how you're adding value, which I think can be difficult for organizations. And something that we really try to educate our clients on, which is target audience first. Like, who are you reaching? And to use your language, Josh, human to human. We want to be able to create this connection. And so to create connection, you have to create space for the people that you're talking to. It can't just all be about you and your organization and what you do. So what are some of the questions that changemakers should ask themselves before launching any kind of PR campaign?
It would be that clarity, like how, I guess to use your example, how would you describe it to a 5-year-old? And then of course a 5-year-old would ask, but why? And do that 3 layers deep, if not more, and then have that positioning statement. There is a part in every pitch where you'll say, hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. It should be maybe 2 sentences long, but it should be all of it. It should be the ability to say, this is what we do concisely. This is the mission, a mission-driven brand. They need to be able to say it simply. And that's hard, especially when there's so many, contextually, you're like, well, you got to think about this and that. So the question to ask yourself would be like, what is it that we are doing here? And then keep going, but why, but why, but why, 3 layers deep, and be able to have that positioning statement. And that is going to be just one part of whatever pitch that you get out the door. And honestly, any conversation, literal elevator conversations, they'll be like, well, what do you do? So then it would be, can I say this distinctly? Can I say this with differentiation? Because I'm sure there's a lot of missions and campaigns that are doing something similar. So then it's about the audience. Well, we're doing it for this particular reason and in this way.
Yeah.
I mean, I would add to that. I think one of the big things that we see with a lot of people looking to make change is that first step is terrifying. Whether you're trying to make change via a nonprofit, whether you're trying to do it at an organization, a regular traditional business, it's very scary to put yourself out there, whether that friction is from sending the pitch, whether that friction is from being on a podcast. But I feel like that hormesis is necessary, especially as you're communicating your story. One thing we've noticed is most people we talk to say, oh, I can tell my story. I've got my story. I got it under wraps. It's easy. But then when you start to get into the weeds, things start to kind of get a little bit more nuanced and hard to explain, or they're like, oh, they start to question, what they're explaining. And so doing those first few reps, one, acknowledging it's going to be scary, but getting out the door anyway and getting on a few shows, getting a few pieces of content placed, you're going to get feedback, and it doesn't hurt as bad as you think it will. And that feedback's actually really exciting. And then you can do it again and you get better and better and better. And those first few shows, this is why I say that go on those first few shows that are emerging, getting out there, because it's not going to hurt your brand or your self-image as much. They're emerging, they're probably working out kinks too, and kind of you're all going to grow together. So it's not as scary as it seems, but just get that first pitch out there.
Do you encourage your clients to listen or watch back their interviews or content?
Yeah, we have our version of media training. We created it because most executives, most founders, anyone running some type of business, they're wearing a dozen hats. They don't have the time, you think, to do the professional training that you would think they would need. But even more so, they don't have the recall. Most of us don't have the recall to retain all of that. So we have a very simple training that we do, and we offer it in our store, where it's, if you're going to do any type of media training, just do this. You need to learn just a very practical application. It really is ABC, and understanding how to know your messages, and then be able to articulate those based on any question that is sent your way.
Very, very powerful. We at Javelina, we do a lot of work with politicians, and the number one rule is you don't have to answer the question that's asked, which drives people crazy when they're watching politicians being interviewed. But it's an art. You sort of answer the question and you pivot to what you actually want to say.
Yeah, we call them these transitional phrases, and if you just know a few of those, you could basically answer, not answer the question. And especially if you're in a hard-hitting interview, most of us won't be sitting in front of like a hardened journalist, but for politicians, they're going to be saying, no, like, I want you to validate what you're saying right now.
Right. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. What does in today's age, with so much changing, but then also the media landscape, which can be very ideologically driven, divided, clickbaity, algorithm driven, what does ethical PR and storytelling look like?
So we think about this a lot because, again, you can send a lot of pitches that are meant to be, someone's like sensational, that's, or hyper controversial. And we certainly encourage people to be, if it's relevant to them, participate in cultural conversations, what's happening around the world. But ethics would dictate that you're not lying, you're not fudging the truth. There are journalists where they already have their angle before they even talk to you. So there is a component of being able to see that. I have certainly turned down opportunities, seemingly big opportunities for my clients. And as an advisor, we're able to see things. Again, it's whatever they're telling you, you might want to do a little bit of digging into that. But the ethics when it comes to storytelling, it's usually you're staying in the clear. You're not trying to be controversial. We see things like greenwashing of products and messaging. Or the most recent one that I've noticed are people are calling it weaponized empathy, where their marketing is they're trying to appeal in a way that is not genuine. And so it's their way of trying to participate in something that's happening in the world. And it's best to just not. Your audience is going to trust you more if they know that you don't operate in areas of gray. You're not trying to be on the very edges of everything all the time. And if that's your brand, own it, but also know that the sentiment is, there's going to be just as much negative sentiment about your brand as positive. And the brands that are saying, no, this is where I want to play.
Totally. We at Good News, we talk about authenticity probably way too much. We talk about it in almost every conversation. And authenticity really is, I feel, the antidote. We work with people that want to share their stories, just like the mission that you're promoting here is how to change the world. We want to work with good people that have those mission-driven pursuits. And one thing that we see is, and this isn't every agency, but we'll see PR agencies that might just need to get a placement to say that they're, doing work. And so they'll shoehorn a story into, a peg that shouldn't be there. And I feel like in many cases, that's where some of the integrity and things start to fall apart. And so that's why we really opt for telling your own story and empowering changemakers to get out there and to pitch, because they can protect their story with their authenticity, and that authenticity will shine through and not only protect you, but further accelerate you. People want to connect with other authentic individuals. No one likes it when you're telling a fib or posturing a bit too hard.
Absolutely. So let's come back to AI. Josh, you mentioned AI earlier. What are some ethical, I guess to use that word again, but also sustainable ways that people can use AI to aid their communications and media efforts?
Yeah. I mean, we could talk about this for hours. I'll give you some of my favorites. So some of my favorites are going to start with summarizing research. So one of the big things that we do when we're working with different clients is, well, we build three core assets for them. We build a connecting index, which explained to a 5-year-old would be, it's kind of like a media list. It's a list of journalists and outlets that you should consider reaching out to. The second thing we create is a storytelling index, which is basically just an index of all of the stories about your brand and your mission and what you could tell. And then the 3 is kind of a mix merging of those two. It's the pitching index, where you take your story, you take your contacts, and then you create an effective pitch. And part of that process, when we're doing work creating a connecting index, it's not just, a media list where we pull a list of journalists and we just send them a templated email, but instead we advocate for doing deep research. And we've talked about that a bit on this so far, but that deep research, what it looks like is an individual will analyze, the last handful of podcasts that a person did, analyze what they stand for, who their audience is. And that stuff can be done really effectively with AI. You can go to a homepage of a podcast or a journalist's website. You can copy all the text and throw it into like ChatGPT or Notebook LM or whatever you prefer to use, and have it summarize and give you kind of the high level points. And that gives room for you to read and then pull out some kind of snippets and then understand which threads to pull on deeper. And that's where you can go back to the source material. But AI lets you do that at scale. So, you can spend an hour and you can analyze dozens and dozens of different podcasts at a level that you formerly would have to either do yourself for hours on end or have an intern or someone, a staff member help you. And that's probably one of my favorite ways, is taking lots of data and making it really actionable and easy to use. And I feel like that's going to be the most applicable for people. And then on the other side of it, finding the right people to reach out to at an organization. You can do that kind of same approach, but instead of having ChatGPT give you summaries, look for the right individuals to reach out to. And you can have it give you citations so you can verify yourself, make sure it's the right person. But that speeds up the process of getting to the right individual that you can then tell your story to. So it's a lot of data analysis kind of at a wide scale. So again, you can be you.
Thank you, both of you, for your time today and for giving us so many incredible insights, and just a lot for our audience to chew on and think about how they can apply everything you shared to their own storytelling and getting their own message out, because I know that is something that everybody listening wants to do. Before we wrap up, I have sort of our speed round. So what I want to ask you guys is, if there is one place that you would push people to, a resource where they can learn more about everything that we have been talking about today, what would that be?
Our website, we just updated it to have what is basically a roadmap of what we've talked about here, from what you should be doing, whether on your own or if you need some help. We're obviously here. We've created a system that compounds. But if you are going to look at this and consider this as your PR marketing visibility strategy, for 2025 and beyond, I would go to the website, and specifically we have a tab that's how it works. And it is a roadmap. As you scroll, it will just tell you, okay, point 1, point 2, and it will tell you those mile markers that you would be hitting if you were doing this in a way that was actually doing the thing. It was compounding with time, because ultimately you want to not just have a bunch of pitches out the door, but you want a pipeline so that through the foreseeable future, yeah, we're banking on. We just need to ramp up or ramp down, or we have a launch coming, or we have this big moment, this big event, etc.
Absolutely. And what's your website address?
highgoodnews.com. So HI, like hello, but hi, good news. And then go to the tab, how it works.
Great. And if there's one thing that people should be thinking about in terms of some of the topics that we've talked about today, what would that be?
How can you connect with other people on a visceral level, on a human level, not on a, hey, can I get something out of this exchange? But hey, look, like Catherine's a real human and she's running a podcast and a successful business. How can we connect and benefit each other? And I think that honestly, that's one of our kind of North Star missions of how we want to change the world, is helping people connect on that human first approach.
I love it. And then last but not least, what is one thing that people can do to incorporate some of the things that we've been talking about today?
Do it. Just get to it. Words on paper. In school, they would always tell us as journalists, you can't write and edit at the same time. So getting those words on paper, even if they're overly verbose, overly self-serving, is step one. So start that process of, who do I want to be connecting with? So podcast hosts like yourself, journalists, or just publications, and then you'll find the journalists. And then what do I know about them? And from that, you will start to connect all those dots yourself in a way that feels like, oh, this is a pitch that I'd be proud of.
Shanté, Josh, thank you so much for your time today. What is the best way for people to connect with you both?
Honestly, go to highgoodnews.com. You can fill out the contact form, or we're both pretty active on LinkedIn.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
There you have it. Another absolutely incredible conversation. And I am so grateful to Shanté and Josh for everything they shared. They just spilled themselves open. Here is everything you need to know about securing earned media and PR coverage in today's landscape. I jotted down so many notes, but one of the things that I wrote down, which I think is such great advice, and I'll probably borrow it and give it to all of our clients before I connect them with good news, is that an effective pitch makes a stranger care in less than 200 words. And that is such incredible advice that I think if we incorporate into all of our communications, whether it's a direct earned media pitch or even a social media post, how do you make a stranger care in less than 200 words? That is how you get your story out there, and that is how you change the world. Thank you so much for joining me. And until next time, when I cannot wait to share another story of change with you, I hope you have a great one.